July 2017, making a audio recording to talk about environmental certification. I'm going to focus a little bit more on agriculture, organic agriculture, biodynamic agriculture, and the certification of the practice. For more information, you could go to keepingintheflow.com. I've been wanting to make this recording for a while. However, I was debating if I should prepare some material, prepare myself before doing it. The problem with preparing too much is that it becomes daunting, and I end up not doing it, postponing it all the time. So I decided just to record and wing it, basically. I know this stuff, like what I'm talking about here. It's just I'm hoping I'm going to be able to present it in a logical fashion, in a way that it'll be clear for you what I'm trying to say. So why is it that I want to be talking about this? Well, I guess I have to say that in my past life, in my former career, I dabbled in certification, sustainability, environmental certification. I'm a certified ISO auditor, environmental standards, and I wrote many environmental standards, and I audited many companies and worked for nonprofit organization, government, and I also worked for private marketing firms. And I've been studying also a lot of the different certification schemes, even though I wasn't working per se, being paid for that. I still studied them for my own knowledge. So what I'm about to relate comes from personal experience and having worked professionally in the field of environmental certification. So first thing I would like to say is that linked to why I'm doing this is because by and large I have been pretty much disgusted by what I've seen, by what I've learned, by what the certification bodies are doing, those that issue their certificates to the farmers or corporations that claim they have an environmental product or they're providing a greener service. There's a lot of incompetency. There's a lot of corruption, a lot of hidden agendas. Most people have no idea what's going on with this whole certification thing. That's all these regulations, the standardization of the industry and the services and the environmental movement. Also, how it's all linked to the green economy and to the shift of what's going on in the global agenda. All this stuff is all linked at many deep levels, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but boy, just because I really don't know how someone would want to listen to like 2 or 3 hours of this stuff. Maybe this will be useful for someone who's trying to figure out all of this environmental certification thing. So just to put you a little bit into context, these environmental labels, the whole labeling of the sustainability or labeling of the green products or organic agriculture, basically the idea is that it is assumed that the consumers don't have time to do the research in order to know what is inside of a product, a consumer product, or how a vegetable or fruit has been grown. It is assumed that the consumer doesn't have time or is not equipped intellectually or technically to understand what is the industrial process or the formulation of a product. And so companies, governments, agencies, they're called in the jargon certification bodies, will take on the responsibility of analyzing a product, analyzing a sector of the economy, and writing a standard with criteria, indicators that an auditor will assess to determine if the product meets the standard, meets the regulations, meets the criteria. If it does, it is awarded the right to use a label, be it the organic USDA organic label or any other green label or sustainable management label. And it is assumed that once the consumer sees that label, a relationship based on trust is established, and that the consumer can make better decisions in their purchases. But this whole marketing aspect, this whole trust aspect is very flawed, because the consumer may believe that there are certain attributes behind the label, when in reality there might be different attributes behind the product. Okay, and this is pretty much always the case. Pretty much, it is often the case that the certification body that manages the certification and the right to use the label has a marketing department to communicate to the public, to build this the trust. Ultimately, the bottom line is that they need to make some money. It's a business. They have to generate revenue in order to maintain the standards, pay the employees, and so on, and grow the market. It's always about growing the market, because there's a push behind all of these eco labels, some kind of movement behind it, be it the green movement and the sustainability movement, and there's some forces behind it that want that to grow, okay, politically, economically. So these certification bodies also want this to grow. So they have a marketing facade that will bend reality in order to build consumer trust. And I'm not exaggerating here. I have seen it firsthand. It is not pretty. It is the bending the border is borderline lying, basically. And they came up with this term called greenwashing, and the people who came up with the term greenwashing were managing an eco label, and they were also greenwashing and lying, which was ironic, but nobody figured it out. So that's the basic context behind this certification, the logo, how it all works, with the politics behind it, the economy behind it, the shifting of the social values for some reasons that are usually unknown by the general public, or at least they believe they know it, and then these agencies that are pushing the agendas. And it's pretty powerful, because they create the market, they create the green market, they create that, and they force themselves into department stores. And I say forced, it's more like there's a very strong lobby going on. For example, the paper company, the printing and paper companies, which will lobby the government to purchase greener paper, environmentally friendly printing paper, because they know the government is one of the biggest users of paper, And then if that pulp mill sells the pulp that is, quote, greener because of sustainable forestry, and they have a greener paper, and the government has a purchasing policy to purchase greener products, then that forest company will see its sales increase because they have secured that market. So all the corporations are running to try to get this certification, even though it might be a voluntary thing. It is not that they have to get it, but if they want to a piece of the pie, they have to get it. You see, and it's the environmental movement that is fronting this this shift, going beyond government regulation into this slightly altered form of regulating the market. I haven't made a judgment value yet on whether or not this is good or not, but it'll come. So if we get down to the agricultural business, what we're looking at is the rise of the organic movement. And what I have been seeing here is not pretty at all. Really, it is the word that best describes this is disgusting. The history here behind the organic movement basically is pretty simple. I mean, long time ago, before the industrial era, people were growing food without these synthetic chemicals. Okay, there were no synthetic chemicals. So back then, there were no synthetic chemicals. People would just use whatever, cow manure. They had all sorts of techniques to make compost or this and that and the other. And they grew food. But their food wasn't as domesticated, right? And then the domestication of the food came, bigger corn, bigger tomatoes, requiring greater, quote, soil fertility, right? So this industrial era didn't just bring the green revolution, it brought the chemicals. So that became like the shift there became the traditional agriculture, chemical agriculture. That was pushed big time. The chemical corporations pushed that big time. It became the main form of agriculture that was pumping out the food, most of the food that was found in the supermarkets. And it never stopped. Just since then, it's been more and more and more and more different kinds of synthetic products, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers. It's just been non-stop, the increasing amount of the different kinds of all of these chemical products, synthetic, and now they have non-synthetic. They're trying to find what's the definition for something synthetic, something non-synthetic, something organic, something biological. All of these things are being defined by the, quote, authorities. It's all relative, but they have their definition. That's the first thing. You have to define the words before you write a standard, or else you don't know what you're talking about. Most people don't go and read the definition of GMO. They have no idea what a GMO is, what genetically engineering is. They know in general what it is, but they don't know the strict definition of the USDA, which, by the way, had formulated this definition in early 90s, and only last year in 2016, or even maybe it could have been 2017, did the USDA decide to revise the definition of GMO, because so much new biotech techniques for modifying organisms had emerged that was slipping into the cracks, and because their definition couldn't quite capture this new technology. Anyways, there's a new definition of GMO now, and it still does not prevent some technologies out there to come influence our food, okay? And I won't get into all the details, but they almost let in this new thing called CRISPR. They were the government, the USDA was going to let it in, and it was probably in for a while until there was enough pushback that they actually said no to CRISPR, but there are 2 or 3 other techniques that can be used. It's this whole definition I'm talking about here, where genetically modified, genetic engineering has to do with bringing foreign genes inside of a cell. But if you're just dabbling with the genetic material inside a cell, then it's not genetic engineering. And so they've been trying to figure that out. It's quite perverse. But anyways, back to the history. So then I think it's the Rodale Institute came up with this term organic because they were seeing so many farmers using so many chemicals, and it was destroying the soil, the life in the soil, and the fertility. Basically, they needed to add more and more and more chemicals, but in order to sustain the yield, crazy amounts of yield, because at first the plants responded to that and they kept making bigger plants, right? So more chemicals and more chemicals. And then eventually some people decided they wanted to go back to something more, quote, natural. And so emerged the concept of organic. And then the United States and Canada, all sorts of groups popped up saying, we're going to check out your farm and issue a notice that you are doing something, quote, organic, okay? Many states in the United States had even more than one of these certification bodies that were issuing certificates of compliance to their standard of what they believed was organic. But when you would read, when a consumer would look at a product, they would see a label said organic. But there were so many out there that you could take a product X and see organic with a certain label, but product Y said organic with a different label, and so on and so on. So the consumers, they didn't really know what they were buying anymore because they couldn't follow and read all the standards of all these different certification bodies. Still, I'm not passing judgment here whether or not these standards were good or not. Then came in the government, the USDA, that branch of the government that took in this certification of organic and made it that nobody can certify organic except for the government, okay, in the United States here. So many of the players that were already established and had members, and they had, they've been certifying organic for a while, were given the right to come at the table and express what they thought organic should be. And once the government, the USDA, would formulate its own standard based on pieces and bits and pieces of the other players out there, these certification bodies could continue to function with the new standard and keep their members and continue in their business. Some of them were weeded out. Some of them probably were disgusted and left, because the government, when the government made its standard of organic, it wasn't as strict as some of the people that were out there. Some people are like, whoa, the government has watered down what it means to be organic, and we don't want to participate in this anymore. So already that was like trying to make a compromise with all these different agencies out there led to some sort of watering down through compromise. And what did the government do? The USDA actually gave the management of the National Organic Program to the marketing department, the marketing section of the USDA. This is what they do. The certification bodies are all moving towards linking their certification to marketing, because marketing is the communication front of most companies. Marketing is not a pretty practice. For having worked in a marketing firm, I call it market lying, basically. It's like there's a gray zone between the truth and lying. And that little gray zone is where marketing operates, okay? And that by itself is kind of disgusting, okay? always flirting there with the lies, and going there too, going into the lies, right? And there are very few regulations out there that prevent marketing from lying. There are some, but very difficult to enforce, very difficult to prevent the lying. Or exaggerating is perfectly fine. This is what's going on with the organic movement. There's the exaggerating, the greenwashing is tons and tons and tons. And I'll get back to that later. So then after a while, the USDA, the National Organic Program, revised the standards and it watered it down again. Now you have to know that the way this was set up was that there was a board of directors that was set up that was supposed to be the ones in charge of recommending changes to the standard to the USDA, and then the USDA would say, okay, yes or no to these recommendations, and then change the standard or not, okay? It's more complicated than that, but that, by and large, is going on. The board of directors is supposed to be balanced, which means there's supposed to be someone from the industry, someone from the health department, someone from government. There's supposed to be a purchaser, a user, a consumer, an environmentalist, and all. It's supposed to be balanced. But when you look at who's on the board and you look at their job title and where they worked before they were where they are now, you see how it has a big slant towards the industry, big ag industry that comes in lobbying their pesticide, their herbicide, their synthetic product, or their product that they don't want to be labeled synthetic, and they're going to argue that it's non-synthetic, and they have all their research to why it's synthetic or not, why is this pesticide is safe, why it should be allowed in organic. And that is the biggest misconception about organic certification, the organic agriculture. People think organic means no spraying. It could not be more false. And you go online and you see tons of people on YouTube saying why they eat organic, because there's no spraying of chemicals, no spraying. You see tons of blogs out there, people saying there's no spraying. This is because the marketing has purposefully pushed only certain positive aspects of this organic program and has failed to give equal weight to the things that might not be well perceived. You see, that's a form of greenwashing right there. So people think organic means no spraying, but there's actually in the organic, in the standard, there's a whole section on what is allowed to be sprayed. What is allowed, okay, it's what are the synthetic chemicals that are allowed and what are the non-synthetic chemicals that are allowed. And there's a lot of them. I mean, I think I had counted 60 something. And there's inside of those 60, there are some things that say all the chemicals that have been approved in the class 3 of the EPA, blah, blah, blah. And then that links to like a whole bunch of other chemicals that are allowed. And these non-synthetic chemicals, again, what's the definition between non-synthetic versus synthetic? But synthetics are allowed to be sprayed. There are synthetic herbicides, synthetic pesticides, synthetic fungicides that are allowed to be used in the organic agriculture, and as well as non-agricultural products, as well as non-synthetic products. And vaccines don't even count. Antibiotics sort of count, but if the animals are sick, then the rules become less important. You see, it's a very complex standard to read. Most people out there would not be able to fully comprehend all the details of the standard, of the USDA organic standard. It is so complicated the way they did it. It's not like you download one document and read it. There are so many different documents that you have to know, and then so many other exceptions to the rules, documents that outline the exceptions, document. There's, for example, if the USDA decides that there's a drought, let's say in a certain region of the United States, then that will change some of the criteria and some of the indicators in the standard. They are no longer applicable or watered down. And for the last, I don't know how many years, California has been under this drought, this officially recognized drought by the USDA. So much so that most of the regulations pertaining to the organic animal certification have been watered down for years, which includes like, for example, if you have cows in the organic standard, they're supposed to be eating grass from outside, growing outside. A cow's supposed to go outside and eat grass, right? So there's a percentage of the food that should be grass, but under drought that percentage is lowered, and the cow then does not eat that much grass. And then there are things like, for example, if you are going to fertilize your land, you have to use organic fertilizer. But if you can't find it, and this and that and the other, and this and that and the other, percentages of how much you have to use is changed. It is very complex to navigate through all these regulations. But I've done it. I actually helped some people get their organic certification and do the paperwork and all that. It is quite the experience. It is actually, again, I'm going to use the word disgusting. You have to fill in paperwork and answer questions like, please indicate what kind of pesticides you spray on your, what kind of fertilizers are you using? And you're like, wait a minute, well, I'm not using pesticides? Why is it that there's an assumption that you're using pesticides? You see, it just goes to show the organic certification does not mean there's no spraying. There's actually some sections in there that require you to be killing insects and killing plants that are, quote, noxious weeds. You see, if you have an organic farm and the auditor comes and sees a weed there that the government has decided should not be on your land, you have to spray and kill that weed. And if you go into the standard and you say, well, what am I allowed to use here to spray? And you have all these synthetic chemicals that you're allowed to use, and all these non-synthetic chemicals and these non-agricultural products you're allowed to use to spray to kill insects and weeds. And you spray all of this here, and still you can't get rid of the Kogan grass or whatever it is there. Well, then the rules shift, and then you're allowed to use anything out there because you have to kill that weed. And you will not lose your organic certification because you have demonstrated that the product that you used to try to kill the weed wasn't working, so you had to go to something hardcore. This is all part of the organic program. And then there's the enforcement of the program. See, it's one thing to have a standard and have people comply to it, have auditors going out there, but what about the enforcement and the fraudulent activities? It's a whole other can of worms here. And It is not to take lightly. This world is not populated by honest people. I'm sorry to say that, but I've traveled across America, across Canada, and I've been to organic farms. And I know for a fact, when the going gets tough, the farmer will use a antibiotic or a dewormer to save their animals, and they don't want to lose their certification. They know that maybe it's better not to tell the auditor that they did that. Stuff is going on. I've seen it with my own eyes. There's this guy here right nearby where I live, and he goes to the farmer's market and he sells organic vegetables. And his fertilizer comes from those big chicken factories, those disgusting big chicken factories. They feed these chickens with this toxic food with arsenic and antibiotics. And these chickens, they're like, they could barely walk. And they're sick and diseased chickens. And their poo is collected and composted and sold as fertilizer. People use this here and claim to the consumer they're selling organic food. This is going on. You go to the USDA National Organic Program and try to find the section on the webpage that talks about the fraud verification, something like that. You will find a list of the fraudulent certificates out there. What this is producers or handlers that have a fake organic certificate and are selling organic products. And it's everything from wheat to watermelons to compost to nuts, this, that, and the other, coming from Mexico, United States, Brazil, China. And this is only what the USDA has uncovered. This is another thing that I've seen in certification bodies. Very little amount of their funds goes to the fraud investigation department. Very little. The bulk of the money goes to the marketing, to push and to grow the market. And this is very successful because the USDA is now a multi-billion-dollar industry. The organic industry in the United States and in the world is increasing exponentially. Exponential increase. Every year, they're proud to say, we have increased by 5% or by 10% in the last X years. They are proud to say how fast and quick the organic certification, the organic industry has increased. Well, that's because they're watering down the standard. They're letting more and more synthetic chemicals, or there's more loopholes. Less enforcement. Not a lot of money goes to that. But yet they do find some. Now think of all of the things that is out there that they are not finding. And I think at this point it's important to say that I'm not saying all the organic farmers are corrupt and that they're spraying toxic chemicals. No, I know, like I have a friend here who has a blueberry farm. And she doesn't spray anything. And that's why I accepted to work with her and help her maintain her certificate and fill out the paperwork. She doesn't spray anything. She doesn't put any fertilizer. Her berries are just grown outdoors by nature. But she has a hard time because they're like, what fertilizers do you put in your fields? She says, nothing. Well, if you don't put any fertilizers, then the fertility of your soil is declining, and therefore you will fail your organic certification unless you can demonstrate that your fertility is not going down. What they're saying is everyone is putting fertilizer, so you should be putting fertilizer, and please select a fertilizer in the list of what you're allowed to be putting out there. And one would think, well, it's easy. You just put in some cow manure or, compost, some good, clean, organic, composted cow manure. But let me tell you this, billion-dollar industry increasing exponentially across the world. You tell me, where is this beautiful organic cow manure coming from? Where's this amazing compost coming from? Well, I was doing some research last week in the fraud advisory section of the USDA. The two first frauds that have been uncovered are compost, vermicompost, coming from Mexico. Okay, so what that means is that there is non-organic compost being sold as organic compost that farmers are buying, trucking in, spreading on their land, and then they get their organic certification because the auditor says, "Whoa, what kind of compost you put in here to maintain the fertility of your soil?" Says, "Look, I bought this organic compost. See, look. Oh, no problem." I Googled the name of these Mexican companies and who certified them. Funny, interesting, because these Mexican companies were certified by a Californian certification body. I was like, huh? They are renowned to be using municipal sludge, sewer sludge, and composting that and selling that. And I was like, no. Were they selling the sewage sludge, which they call biosolids now? These facilities that are bagging this up and selling it as biosolids, as compost. This is what they're doing in these places. And so I was like, no, hopefully that's not what was being sold here, to the organic farmers of America. So I continued my research. And I found city of San Francisco, for years, they were selling compost. They were giving away free compost to schools who had organic gardens, to citizens, to anyone who wanted organic compost would go to the city, to this place, and they would fill up the bags and they would go home with free organic compost, all right? It came out 6 years later. It was municipal sludge. It was human shit, and it was not organic at all. They found traces of all sorts of stuff in there. So disgusting. Check it out on Google. And the the state of New Mexico, Texas, and it's just my research just kept coming out. Biosolids are being spread right now in agriculture fields all across America, everywhere in Mexico, everywhere. This is the new big thing. And to find that there was some fraudulent certificates regarding biosolids was more than disgusting. There was a judge who ruled. There was a court. Okay, it was the Environmental Association of something versus Visilac, which is the head honcho there for the organic program. And the organic program was in court because of their regulations vis-a-vis biosolids. For a while there, they were letting in biosolids as a fertilizer, but the judge said, I'm not going to allow this here, and gave the USDA 60 days to change their standard. It's not pretty, I'm telling you. This organic thing is not pretty at all. People need to be informed. When they feel nice and fuzzy inside and they feel righteous and like they're going to save the planet because they're going to go to Whole Foods and they're going to spend twice the amount of money to buy a cabbage that's organic, or this and that, an organic soap or cosmetic, there's nothing that guarantees that that product is actually safe because the standard has been watered down. Those synthetics that go in there, figure out what's the list of the synthetic chemicals that are allowed to be sprayed as insecticides and all that. Go have a look. You'll find the Cornucopia Institute has analyzed some of this stuff, and they're like, whoa, this stuff is actually toxic, and there's some scientific proof that shows that this synthetic pesticide is toxic. But yet it's an organic. So really, the consumer is like throwing the dice there. You don't know if the product you have is this product coming from this farm that should not be really organically certified, that has squiggled its way through loopholes and squiggled its way to organic certificates selling that, or if it's this amazing farmer who doesn't spray anything, who's also part of the organic movement. You don't know. And actually the odds are that you're not going to be buying something that comes from this amazing farmer, because the standard has been watered down, constantly been watered down. So you have now what used to be these industrial big ag farmers who couldn't even come close to passing organic, have now made slight modifications and are passing it. Okay? So why you have Oreo cookies that are organically certified, because these natural flavors are now certified. And then there's then there's water and salt that has been excluded from the determination of what is organic. Okay, because when you want to get organic, it's complicated, but there's made with organic, and then there's 100% organic. Okay, made with organic is like there's just a certain percentage of the products in your formulation that are organic, and the other ones they don't have to be, and you could get the made with organic label. If you have 100% organic, then it is supposed to be 90-something%, I think, that is organic, and there's a small percentage that doesn't actually need to be organic. But what never counts is salt and water. Like when you have to send your information into the certification body, you never have to put in water or salt to get like 100%. The weight of the water or the salt does not count. Why does this matter? Why does it matter? It matters because you're using municipal water. That is not organic. That will have pesticides, hormones, contaminants, heavy metals, Lord knows what. There was a study done in the 90s, and it was redone not so long ago. They studied the municipal water of I don't know how many big cities in the United States, and there was like hundreds of different chemicals inside of the municipal water, not to mention fluoride and all that all that junk in there. So they excluded water because they knew not a lot of stuff would be organic if you start to look at water. And then rainwater, the chemtrails and all this stuff coming down there, just better not look at water. The only thing they do is if you're using well water to have your water tested for E. coli or whatnot. They actually crack down on people using well water. Municipal water, that's fine. And salt, well, see, salt is the same thing. Salt is not really salt. See, salt is a very complex thing, okay? Salt is like, has all these different minerals, but they take salt and they remove the minerals, and it goes to the military for jet propulsion, something like that, rocket fuel or whatnot. They need these minerals. They take it from salt. And what's left behind is sodium chloride. And then they put anti-caking materials in there, this, that, and the other, right? And they sell it as salt, table salt. Morton, you know that blue box with that cartoonish little girl with an umbrella there? Morton salt. That's military. That's a military byproduct. It's toxic, and it doesn't count in organic. People have no idea what organic really is. See, I have no problem with, you want to pervert organic, then inform people to say what it is. Then let people decide if they want to pay twice the price for something that has been sprayed with all these synthetic chemicals, with maybe this really disgusting fertilizer that Lord knows where it came from and what kind of certificate is behind it. Let people know the truth. Not this lie of no spraying, not that. See, this is what disgusts me. And tricking people into thinking that they are buying this, but no, they're not. They're getting that, and they have no idea what they're getting. As everything gets watered down, that greenwashing becomes even more severe, even more disgusting. Environmental certification linked with marketing firms. This is what's going on. And all the people who have no idea, they're copy pasting the taglines coming from the marketing firms. People have these blogs and they're copy pasting this information, spreading the greenwashing, spreading the misinformation to the public. It doesn't stop there. I had to look at biodynamic agriculture, which is supposed to be this organic plus spirituality. Let me tell you, there's a lot of narcissism in there. Boy, spiritual narcissism. Environmental, spiritual narcissism. I read the Demeter standard. Biodynamic agriculture is under the purview of the Demeter certification. I downloaded their standard and I read it. They basically say it's organic. You follow the USDA organic plus a few of these extra little things. These few little extra things, like spraying the biodynamic preparations, for example, which pretty much no farmers are actually making on their land. Their marketing is even worse than the USDA. They claim the farm is a closed organism. Nuh-uh. Not if you're buying your preparations from Josephine Porter Institute. You're supposed to be making them yourself. Those preparations are supposed to be the homeopathy, the healing agents of the earth. Farmers are not making them themselves. Most farmers are also trucking in the compost from outside and buying the seeds from outside. And I could go on and on. I did a complete evaluation of the Demeter biodynamic standard. It is full of loopholes. Things like the farmer is supposed to try to get this, but if they can't find it, then they can get this, you know? In the end, if you take all these loopholes and you imagine somebody getting certified through all these loopholes, it has nothing to do with what the marketing of biodynamic is saying to the world. And the marketing front of biodynamic agriculture is paid for and sponsored by the wine industry. If you look at the US Demeter certification body, and you go and you look at who started this, who's the person that got this the right to the words biodynamic, okay? Because this is all legal stuff, right? You can't say you have biodynamic wine if you have not paid your dues to Demeter, and if they have not certified your wine, you cannot say it is biodynamic. It is illegal. And who's behind the Demeter certification? The wine industry. The Fries there in California or in Sonoma, somewhere around there. Fry Wines. But with all the loopholes in it, plus it's built on the organic, which means there's all the lists there of the synthetics and non-synthetics and non-agricultural products that are allowed, minus a few little things that are different in the biodynamic standard. Very little. Just a few little things that have been said, well, okay, you're actually not allowed that, or not allowed that. But nah, it doesn't really matter because most of the synthetics are allowed anyways. And if you go on the wine industry, you go look at the wines that are certified biodynamic, and you go on their webpage, man, they will just praise how they have this and how amazing this. They don't spray that. They're this, they're that. But they won't tell you that the preparations that they're putting in there come from Josephine Porter Institute, for example. And they won't tell you that the preparations are made by killing deer, getting the deer bladders, stuffing it with chamomile, and then hanging it on a tree for a year, and then spraying that on the vineyards. Or that they kill a cow, they'll go get the stomach of the cow, they'll fill it with another plant, and then they'll compost the stomach in that, and then they'll spray that. These are those healing preparations there that comes from Rudolf Steiner, supposedly. Rudolf Steiner, the clairvoyant Austrian-German spiritualist, occultist, who created the anthroposophical cult. They certainly don't tell you that on their webpage. that there's these weird occult ritual killings of deer. And then you talk to these people in biodynamics, they say, well, no, we don't actually kill the deer. The hunters kill the deer. And, we're such good people, we actually recycle the bladders. And then that's what we use to make our preparations. Then they claim that biodynamic is the most sustainable form of agriculture. I'm telling you this. If all the farms in the world converted to biodynamic, there would not be enough cow bladders or enough deer bladders or cow manure to stuff in the cow horns to create all these preparations. Just think about it. Think about it. If all the food grown in the world relied on killing deer, what kind of sustainable movement is that? But no, the marketing, they hide all that. And they just say they're healing the planet. I kid you not. You go on the Demeter website, and what is their slogan? Healing the planet. Healing the planet. You can't get more spiritually narcissistic than that. Claiming that their wines are vegan and that they know all about planetary health. There's nothing healing about agriculture for this planet, really, if you think about it. I mean, if you till the ground or if you have a garden and you go away for 2 years, come back, have a look at your garden. Nature will have reclaimed it. If there's a forest around, it will become a forest again. Nature will heal the wound that you have done to the land. Tilling the ground or growing grapes, putting in fertilizer is not healing the planet. And they say this because of the spiritual aspects of biodynamic, which is gardening with the moon, the cosmos, and the elemental beings, and it's the spiritual side. And I don't disagree that there are non-material forces out there, but that doesn't necessarily make it spiritual in the sense of sacred, in the sense of the true definition of healing. Anyway, so you see where I'm going with this here. It's again, the marketing is ruining it for everybody. It's the lies, it's the deceptions. So what's the solution for you? What's the solution for the consumer? The solution to the consumer is to stop believing authorities outside of yourself. Do your own research, figure things out on your own. Don't just go trusting some third-party organization who claims to be righteous or spiritual. In this day and age, you can't do that. There are honest people out there, but by and large, everything's been flipped upside down, turned around. The light is the darkness. The mindset is infected so many people, so many nations out there. Some nations are completely under a very sociopathic, psychopathic, narcissistic mindset. It's hard to find integrity. To just blindly trust certification agency is not a good idea. So there you have it. That's there's a lot more. I could have opened the computer and read the standard and pointed out all of the failings of that certification scheme. I could do the same thing for all the other environmental schemes out there. And yes, you could say, no, but that's better than nothing. And maybe sometimes it is, but not always. See, I grow food. And I will never, ever get the environmental certification. I will never apply for the USDA Organic Standard. I don't want to be part of that family. Plus, I don't have thousands of dollars to give to this government that is perverting the notion of food, of clean food. I will not support that. I will not support the biodynamic Demeter wine industry fraud. I'm not going to back that up. This new world order, which is not really new, but it is basically the standardization of the world through regulations, through voluntary regulations. That's the ruse. The ruse is there. You could try to force all the governments in the world to pass the same laws, or you have voluntary standards that people will pay to get into the club, into the market segment, the green market segment, if they want to sell their products. Because like that blueberry farmer, she can't make it if her things are not organic. If her blueberries are not organic, she gets $1 something a pound. If they're organic, she gets $5-6 a pound. See what I'm saying? They have created a market by which you voluntarily have to get the certificate in order to be able to survive as a farmer or as whatever it's going to be. If you're making shampoo, if you're making adhesives, if you're making caulking, if you're making whatever you're making, you're going to have to follow some form of regulation, and the government regulations will be standardized, but the environmental regulations are coming in through the back door. Like the Forestry Stewardship Council, the FSC certification, which is in 50-something countries in the world, has nothing to do with government regulations, all purely environmental. It has changed the way forestry operates. The governments were like taken back. They're like, wait a minute, we're the ones regulating forestry, not the Greenpeace. No, Greenpeace found a way to lobby Home Depot and all government purchasers and things like that, so that they created a market that industry now wants in. Governments are actually now like part of it. It's all linked. Anyways, I'm gonna stop here. All right, folks. So grow your own food. Find somebody who grows food. Try to push in some good vibrations in your food. Stay away from perverted foods. Eat wild edibles if you can. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Path the truth, an individual one. You are traveling in the nebulous dark cave with your mind entangled with encrypted programs. Programs downloaded into you before birth are making you run in circles, seeking instant gratification and ego identification. It makes you suffer, stagger, and confused. When you realize this, your mind seems to have awoken from a state of slumber. You looked around and saw vast systems of control for information. You saw thousands of people working and realized billions on this planet do the same thing, working not for himself or herself, but for somebody else, working for some purpose they cannot see, hear, or understand.